Hi, I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, President Biden signing more than 36 executive actions in his first week in office concerning the economy, climate change, and immigration. As he reestablishes relationships with world leaders, what will be his most pressing foreign policy challenge? Guest host Fox News correspondent Jillian Turner speaks to Fox News Senior Strategic Analyst, retired General Jack Keane, about how the Biden administration should address global concerns, including Iran and Russia. And while the COVID-19 vaccine rollout appears to offer a way out of the pandemic, there are still questions about the timeline of it all. Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace weighs in on vaccines, the debate over President Biden's executive order blitz, and former President Trump's second impeachment trial. Plus commentary from Fox Nation host Tammy Bruce. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
I'm Dana Perino.
I'm Juan Williams.
I'm Kennedy, and this is the Fox News Rundown. Friday, January 29th, 2021. I'm Jillian Turner. Fox News Senior Strategic Analyst, retired General Jack Keane discusses some of the international hotspots a new Biden administration will be forced to address.
I do think their rhetoric dealing with particularly Putin will probably be a little stronger. It doesn't necessarily mean their actions are going to be any stronger.
I'm Chris Foster. President Biden's been busy signing executive orders since taking office, including some about climate change.
There is a cost benefit. Obviously, you want to do everything you can to stop the emission of greenhouse gases. On the other hand, weaning us off fossil fuels does have a price, and a very real price in terms of jobs, and in many cases, very good paying jobs.
We speak with Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace.
And I'm Tammy Bruce. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
President Joe Biden is wrapping up his first full week in the White House. He's focused much of his attention so far on domestic issues. So what are the biggest immediate challenges the new commander-in-chief faces overseas? What can he put off for a while, and what does he have to focus on starting right now? President Biden will have to navigate a world full of hotspots, including Iran and Russia and China. Earlier this week, CENTCOM confirmed 2 American B-52 bombers flew a nonstop 30-plus hour round-trip mission from the U.S. to the Mideast to send a fresh warning to Iran.
The United States has had some intelligence for some time that the Iranians are moving through their proxies some rockets and missiles into Iraq.
General Jack Keane is a retired 4-star general, the chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, and a Fox News senior strategic analyst.
And I believe that this and other activities that the United States military has been conducting in the last several months is more of a deterrence to dissuade them from using those rockets and missiles against U.S. troops in Iraq. I think that's largely what the issue is. As long as that threat is there, I think probably some of that will continue as we go forward.
General, when you say deterrence, do you mean they're flying these missions to hopefully prevent any kind of arms confrontation between the U.S. and Iran?
Yeah, I think the United States has intelligence that the Iranians intended to do just that, conduct some rocket and missile attacks, which they have done in the past against U.S. forces in Iraq. And flying these aircraft and maintaining the kind of vigilance that we have is trying to prevent the Iranians from taking that action and having a military escalation, in the Persian Gulf as a result of it.
Let's talk about the Iran nuclear deal for a moment. So Biden's team has indicated they want back in, but then this week Iran's foreign minister shut them down, saying Iran's not going to bite first. The United States pulled out of the deal, so the U.S. has to go back to the table and sign up first before Iran's even going to consider talking about anything. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's typical Iranians. They're hardball negotiators. The Obama-Biden team, I think, made far too many concessions back in 2014 when they put together the original deal, which did not include anywhere, anytime inspections. It did not include ballistic missile development. It did not include their malign behavior in the region. And, of course, that established a sunset clause which actually permits them to have a nuclear weapons capability at the time 15 years. Now it's 10 years. So that the deal had a lot of flaws in it, and I'm concerned because the people who will be negotiating this deal were very much involved in negotiating the last one. And Wendy Sherman was the chief negotiator, and she's now going to be the Deputy Secretary of State. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, who is now the National Security Advisor, was involved in negotiations as well. And the Iranians play hardball, even though the Iranians, Jillian, are in a much more desperate situation because of the crippling sanctions on them and the leverage that the Biden administration has as a result of that, and also because of the Abraham Accords, which is the normalization of relationship between the Arabs and the Israelis, gives the Biden administration significant upscale in terms of upside in terms of leverage.
Let's move on to something completely different now. Troop drawdown. So the Trump administration began withdrawing from Iraq and Afghanistan. There's only a couple thousand troops left in these two countries now. So do you think Biden's going to continue down this path, or is he going to freeze things where they are, or even send more troops back into Iraq or Afghanistan?
I think what they're going to do, and I believe it's already begun by the Department of Defense for sure, as well as the National Security Advisor, and that is to reassess where are we really. When it comes to Afghanistan, I thought the deal that the United States made with the Taliban was horrific. It was not in the United States' interest. We made a deal with the Taliban, and we didn't insist on a ceasefire. And as a result of that, they're negotiating with the Afghans right now, and violence is at a high point, literally raging out of control. And that should have been a condition for negotiations themselves. In other words, we're not going to negotiate until both sides agree to stop shooting at each other so we can have meaningful negotiations. I think that's literally step one in the reassessment of the situation in Afghanistan. And I think we'll discover that the Biden administration will probably want to set some conditions with the Taliban in terms of imposing their own will on what's taking place. Otherwise, if we continue to head towards the exits in May, Afghanistan is going to turn into a bona fide civil war as a result of the turmoil that'll come by completely walking away. And it pertains to Iraq, I think they likely have made up their minds that they're going to keep the forces there in Iraq, at least for the near term, and assess whether the number of forces that are there are adequate for the missions that have been assigned.
Let's move on to Russia now before we let you go, General. So President Biden has spoken to Vladimir Putin now, and according to the White House, Biden really pushed him on the solar wind hack and the detention of Russian dissident Alexei Navalny. So the White House is clearly trying to make the case that Biden is going to be tough on Russia. Do you buy that? And also, it's a little early to start comparing Biden and Trump on the issues, but can you believe anything so far is similar between their approaches to Russia?
Well, I do think the rhetoric dealing with particularly Putin will probably be a little stronger. It doesn't necessarily mean their actions are going to be any stronger. President Trump, when it came to Putin, he mostly believed in personal diplomacy, and he was not a critic of Putin's, although his policy actions were. And the United States did take issue with him. I'm not that concerned about the tone. I believe in bringing these subjects up with Putin, they're appropriate, but Putin just blows all of that off. I mean, he's done that with Obama for years. I think he was inside Obama's head, to be frank. I think he had considerable leverage with him. He also had some leverage with George W. Bush when George W. Bush sort of fell in love with his personality. And he knows how to handle American presidents. Putin is a master at it. He's been in power for 20 years. And, you can throw all this rhetoric at him all day long, and he just deflects it. He even deflects the sanctions. The sanctions that have been imposed on him had no behavior modification whatsoever. He's got his national interests, and he's going to pursue those national interests and They are largely at the expense of the United States. I think his behavior will be very consistent as he tries to weaken the transatlantic alliance or NATO and have influence over Eastern Europe and also strategically in the Middle East.
Last question for you, General. So both Biden and Putin say they want to extend the New START treaty for 5 more years. They want it to start pretty soon on February 5th. Is this a good thing for U.S. national security interests? Does it make us any safer from the nuclear threat?
Yes, it does make us safer. This is our strategic nuclear triad that we're talking about, where both countries are held to 1,550 warheads. I actually preferred what the Trump administration was doing, was trying to negotiate the details of this, because the deal favors Russia, who has done a considerable amount of expansion of their nuclear weapons, and we wanted to make certain that the inspections had a little bit more verification to it than what they currently do. And we were at an impasse with the Russians. And I think what we were going to do under the Trump administration is take a 6 months, extend the deal 6 months, or extend it to a year to continue negotiations. It appears that the Biden administration is just accepting all the conditions as they currently are and going ahead and extending it for 5 years. Overall, that is good that the treaty is still in place, but I do think there was an opportunity to actually make that treaty stronger if we were willing to negotiate a little bit longer as opposed to just accepting it as is.
All right, General Jack Keane, thank you so much for joining us today. We learned a lot from you, as we always do.
Well, great talking to you and your audience, Joanne.
This is Tammy Bruce with your Fox News commentary coming up.
President Biden ends his first full week in office, having signed dozens of executive actions and orders covering a theme a day, like Buy American, fighting the coronavirus pandemic, and climate change.
Under the previous administration, the federal government contracts awarded directly to foreign companies went up 30%. That is going to change on our watch. The end goal is to beat COVID-19. When I think of climate change, I think of, and the answers to it, I think of jobs.
There have also been orders regarding health care, racial equity, and more. Around 24 so far, by far more than any other president this early in his term, plus executive actions that are more like non-legally binding items on a wish list.
When you add up all the numbers of executive orders and executive actions by Joe Biden, it is, a magnitude exponentially higher, not only than Trump, but Obama and Bush.
Chris Wallace is the host of Fox News Sunday.
My general feeling is if you're a Democrat and the New York Times says enough already, it's probably time to stop.
Yeah. Pretty ambitious on climate change and the environment, to the point where he's telling federal agencies to consider it in every decision you make. And this, of course, sets up the usual environment versus jobs thing. President Biden says you can take care of both. Republicans say he's abandoning workers in oil and gas and pipeline construction.
Well, look, it was no secret that this president said he was going to be very focused on climate change. I happen to believe in climate change. And, I don't even know, to me, it's like saying I believe in gravity, and that we need to do something about it. On the other hand, there's a cost. There is a cost benefit. Obviously, you want to do everything you can to stop the emission of greenhouse gases. On the other hand, weaning us off fossil fuels does have a price, a very real price in terms of jobs, and in many cases, very good paying jobs. And, for Biden or John Kerry to say, well, we're going to get them out of the coal mines, we'll get them out of the oil fields, and they'll be solar power and wind turbines. First of all, I'm not sure that it's a one-for-one change. I'm not sure that the same number of jobs that are needed, although those green energy are some of the fastest-growing industries. And secondly, I really doesn't appear that there are, as good paying jobs. You're sometimes talking about a $25,000 job replacing a $100,000 job. So if you're going to do this, and there's an argument to be made for it, it seems to me that the government has to be sensitive to the fact that you're going to dislocate a lot of people, you're going to cost them their jobs, and even if you can give them a new job, it's not going to pay nearly as much, and they have to have a program to ease that transition. And to pretend that it's not going to be painful is, first of all, people aren't going to believe it, and particularly the people that matter the most, who are going to lose their jobs, that know better.
Chuck Schumer says the Senate will start debating a new COVID financial relief bill next week. He says if Republicans don't go along with it, Democrats will just do it without them. So do they go big or do they go bipartisan?
Well, there's an interesting article today. I read, I'm sure you do too, so many things, the papers, various political newsletters, and one of them had what seems to be not certain, but an idea of what the Biden administration and the Democrats, particularly in the Senate, might do. And that is that you do both. You go bipartisan on COVID rescue, and by that you take out some of the things that Republicans won't sign on to. And there's a real question as to even if you go smaller and strip out just the more popular things like the $1,400 direct payments, and maybe you don't make that for everybody under a certain income level. Maybe you target it more to people who have lost their jobs, make it much more needs-based. You go smaller on that, and you pass that on a bipartisan level if you can get buy-in. And the things that you strip out, you put in the recovery plan, which is something they're going to do anyway, and you do that on a budget reconciliation basis, which for those folks out there who have a life and don't know all this parliamentary arcana, would allow you to pass it in the Senate with a simple majority of 50 votes. So maybe you go to the principle of bipartisanship with a smaller, more less ambitious COVID rescue package, and you put the rest into a recovery plan that you are going to end up having to pass by reconciliation anyway.
Yeah, I read the same thing you did, and apologies to whoever reported. I just can't remember now because I read a lot this morning. But the White House already pushed back and said, nope, we're not doing it. It's all or nothing. That could just be a bluff, I suppose.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they're clearly not going to get 10 Republican votes to beat a filibuster for anything close to the $1.9 trillion. What they were talking about in a narrow package was more in the nature of $500 to $600 billion, which, I remember when $500 to $600 billion was a big deal. Now it's like, oh, well, we're just going to go down to $500 or $600 billion. That they would do it in a much more, I'm not sure you get 10 votes for that, but it seems to me, particularly if you're Biden and who he is and what he's talking about in bipartisanship and unity and civility in government, it seems to me you want to make an effort to get something through on a bipartisan basis. If you go right away to reconciliation and right away you pass something, jam it down on a straight party line vote of reconciliation, which is 50 votes plus Kamala Harris, and you don't get any Republican buy-in, it doesn't send a very good message. And it really, I think, basically says this is going to be all about us getting through everything we can and forget the other party. And I know that isn't the tone that Joe Biden wants to set. And frankly, I don't think that's what he believes in. He may be old-fashioned in this regard, but I think he genuinely believes that you can legislate and get a compromise.
There do not appear to be the votes to convict President Trump in the Senate when that trial starts the week after next. Some Republicans say the whole thing's unconstitutional because he's out of office. Some say he didn't do anything wrong. I wonder if the trial had been rushed, like immediately after the riot at the Capitol, if there'd been more support for it.
Yeah, I think there's certainly that argument. The converse argument is that maybe you dig some things up, you find some things out, and it actually makes it even clearer that President Trump was responsible, to bear some responsibility for the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. Look, he's not going to get convicted. He's not going to be barred from ever running for office again. You had this procedural vote on whether it was unconstitutional. They got 45 votes. All they need is 38 to defeat any conviction of the president. So there's no chance that Donald Trump, short of some explosive new revelation, is going to get convicted, which then raises the question, what are you doing this for? It's slowing down your confirmations. It's slowing down however do you decide to go ahead with COVID relief. It very much goes against this call for unity and civility in government. It's going to be polarizing. And there are an increasing number of Democrats who say, forget about impeachment, go for censure. It's a black mark, and it's something you can do as opposed to if you go for the trial, he's going to end up not being convicted, and I suppose to some degree, President Trump down in Mar-a-Lago, former president, will be able to view it as exoneration. So, look, having said all of that, Chuck Schumer is the Senate Majority Leader. He's the boss, and he says we're going to have a trial. So they're going to have a trial. But I will say this, it's going to be short. This is not going to be a 2 or 3 week affair. If you told me it's going to last a week, I'd believe it.
President Biden's coronavirus task force is planning to do these 3-time-a-week updates on vaccines and where things stand at the moment with wherever the pandemic is. There's been some mixed messaging on vaccines. It'll be spring, it'll be summer, it'll be fall.
You know, some people are criticizing them. We're sending mixed messages. I mean, this isn't a science. We have found it out. For all the science involved in developing the vaccine, we have found producing the vaccine and distributing the vaccine, and then, the last mile, getting it into people's arms, is a huge logistical challenge. To me, I'm not going to hold. I think it's important to do it as fast as possible. I'm not going to say, throw a penalty flag because one guy says it's going to be summer and the other person says it's going to be the fall. I mean, we know it's going to be months, and they're going to do it as fast as they can. I'm give Biden and his team high marks for being as transparent as they are. I had Rochelle Walensky, the new head of the CDC, an infectious disease doctor, on Fox News Sunday, and she said, right now I can't tell you how many doses we have. I actually gave her high marks. I think that brutal transparency, I know people that don't like Biden are going to say, well, they can't get their act straight. I'd rather have honesty than spin. And if people are saying, in the end, if some people are saying it's going to be summer and some people are saying fall, it doesn't make any practical difference. When it's your turn, you'll be able to get it. I'm now in a group that should be able to get it. I can't get it. I literally went to some of the places that are dispensing it because I had heard these stories. I'm sure that they're out there. That at the end of the day, if some people don't show up, maybe they'll give the doses out to people flying standby. They said no, we're going to keep it till tomorrow, and you can't get it. I didn't like it, but that's the way it is, and I know they're doing the best they can, and I kind of accept that it's a very limited supply and a very precious product at this point. And, when I get the note, it's your turn, I'll go in and get the vaccine.
Well, just in case, I'm going to walk around in nothing but short-sleeve shirts, just in case a syringe happens to fly by.
Well, I didn't. I was wearing a long-sleeve shirt, and I thought, wow, this is going to really be hard because this wasn't one that was going to roll up easily. I thought I'm going to have to be one of those people who unbuttons the top and bares my shoulder and has to get it. But you know what? If I could get it, I'd be very happy.
Chris Wallace, host of Fox News Sunday. Thanks a lot.
You bet. Thank you, Chris.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. In these ever-changing times, you can rely on Fox News for hourly updates for the very latest news and information on your time. Listen and download now at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Rate and review the Fox News Rundown on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
And now, some good news with Tanya J. Powers.
Linden Tutt High School in Sanger, Texas has something most schools don't have, a grocery store. It's run by students and is there to address food insecurity during the pandemic. Anthony Love is the school's principal and says when he took the job, he wasn't expecting hunger and compassion to be two of the main lessons.
My first year being principal, you're thinking about, teachers, and you're thinking about curriculum and computer programs and, just preparing for the school year. And so it was kind of a question that catches you off guard because you're not expecting it. But it doesn't take long just to realize the impact that it can have on students as well as the community.
The store doesn't accept cash, but instead uses a point system. Students can earn points for good deeds by doing chores around school or helping clean. Hunter Weirtman is a student who also manages the store.
I think it's very important because a lot of people don't see the good that can come out during the pandemic. and the stuff that you can do, even though it's hard right now.
The project is a partnership between a ministry and a grocery store chain, but the students are the ones that make it run. They keep up with the inventory, stock the shelves, and monitor the registers. Weirtman says he finds the work rewarding.
I like seeing their smiles and being like how appreciative they are, and knowing that they are thankful that we're doing something like this.
Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
It's time for your Fox News commentary. Tammy Bruce. What's on your mind?
Joe Biden was elevated into the presidency in part because of misleading people about the success of Donald Trump's attack plan to mitigate the destruction of COVID-19, not the least of which was Operation Warp Speed, delivering vaccines within a year. President Biden campaigned on having a plan to defeat COVID-19. We are now being told by the Biden administration, however, that President Trump had no vaccine distribution plan. A strange claim, considering U.S. News and World Report notes that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said it had administered 22,734,243 doses of COVID-19 vaccines in the country and distributed 41,418,325 doses. An objective observer stationed on planet Earth would have to agree that this is the result of President Trump's distribution plan. Moreover, just 2 days after being inaugurated, Mr. Biden revealed he has no plan at all. At a press conference, he told the nation, "There's nothing we can do to change the trajectory of the pandemic in the next several months." Besides revealing the empty suit now in the presidency, this also implies that masks and social distancing really aren't making a difference. In all fairness, Mr. Biden did have a plan, sort of. His plan is to copy what Mr. Trump had already achieved. By the time Mr. Biden entered office, the United States was vaccinating almost 1 million people a day. That goal was suddenly one of the big plans from the new administration. We know Mr. Biden has a plagiarism problem, but when it comes to life and death issues, it's even more unacceptable. COVID-19 has been a disaster for the world. The virus sent from China has killed over 400,000 Americans. With all issues, Americans deserve better than elected leadership and bureaucratic experts using a disaster for political reasons or to bolster their own grandiose view of themselves.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. Did you hear the news? Now you can. With instant updates from Fox News for Amazon Alexa. Just say,
"Alexa, play news from Fox."
In Fox News.
It's the latest when you need it, on demand, from Fox News and Amazon Alexa.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.